I spied on my wife. What I discovered broke my heart. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. She stared at the photos and said, "These mean nothing. My name is Brian, 31, the quiet guy who configures networks so other people can stream, trade, and talk. I never thought I would become the kind of husband who watches a loved one through glass and code. But suspicion moves like water. It finds a path, even through stone." 2 months ago, Claire started coming home late, glittering with new stories that didn't add up, spin classes that left no sweat, coworkers I'd never heard of, notifications that flashed and vanished. The first night I crossed a line, I told myself it was defense. I told myself marriages have fire alarms too. I work in an office that smells like dust and plastic, where I label cables and listen to fans hum. Order calms me. But at home the air felt fractional, sliced by missed calls and tiny lies. I stood to lose more than a marriage. Claire's name is on our joint accounts. My health insurance runs through her newer job, and the townhouse we share sits on a mortgage I barely afford alone. If I expose her, I become the man who broke us. If I don't, I become the man she treats like a spare key. The proof in my hand tonight isn't dramatic. Lyft receipts, ATM withdrawals, a gym entry log that shows out when she texted in. It's not the movies. It's timestamps and addresses and a half-visible username in an encrypted chat. Priya, my coworker, told me to slow down, make a plan, document everything in a calm, legal way. Caleb, my younger brother, said spying makes me the villain even if I'm right. I nodded to both and set a quiet timer in my head. I didn't know the timer would end at a restaurant full of witnesses. When I met Claire, she wore chipped nail polish and a backpack with a broken zipper, and still she looked like a promise. We were 25 and 24, splitting cheap takeout and sharing passwords because trust felt like a shortcut to adulthood. Back then our fights sounded like weather. They passed and left the air clean. The first big purchase we made together was a used couch that squeaked when you leaned back. We leaned back a lot. Lately, our marriage talks like a stranger in our kitchen. Claire's new job pays better, a marketing role with client dinners and late events, and she carries the vocabulary of status like a second phone: deliverables, activation, VIP list. She once laughed in front of friends when I described patching a switch at 2 a.m. and said, "So you basically plug things in?" It was a small joke that cut like a paper edge you only feel later. A week after that, I saw a text I wasn't meant to see. Running late. Don't wait up. You're sweet. No name, only a number. When I asked, Claire rolled her eyes and said it was her boss, then showed me a different thread with a different name and said, "See?" The proof felt curated, as if she had prepared for doubt, like you prepare a slideshow. I told myself I was being dramatic. I told myself that being loved isn't a math problem. But I started writing things down after midnight. Dates, times, smells. The way her tone softened when she needed space and hardened when I asked for it. All of it living in a note app named Groceries. That night, she kissed me gently and called me paranoid with the same breath. The first red flag wasn't a lipstick or a perfume. It was a Lyft receipt to an address that turned into an empty lot on Street View. I screenshotted it, then felt ridiculous, like a man chasing ghosts in pixels. The next was a stack of ATM withdrawals in odd amounts. $140, $180, $60, never from our usual branch. When I asked if she needed cash, she laughed and said, "Who uses cash?" and tossed a card into her purse like a magician. Claire started a new ritual, late-night workouts with a bag that clinked faintly like metal touching glass. She came home glowing, not sweaty, and showered before hugging me. I told myself maybe she met friends first. Maybe she drank sparkling water with lemon. Maybe everything in me that felt crooked was just the shadow of fatigue. Then the gym log happened. I had set up the membership. I knew how to check entries. The timestamp showed her leaving before she claimed she arrived. "System glitch," she said, and threw her hair into a ponytail like a curtain dropping after a short play. I tried to laugh because laughter is easier to live with than fear. Priya watched me count these tiny things at lunch and said, "You're either building a case or burning yourself alive. Pick one." I still wanted to believe that love means trusting the benefit of the doubt. But doubt, it turns out, also wants benefits, and it collects interest in your chest. I decided to look for a second phone, and I found it hidden. The night a mystery charge posted, $327.40 at a restaurant we never visited. I crossed the boundary I had drawn in soft pencil. I cloned Claire's SIM to an old phone using a kit I'd used for lab testing at work. I told myself it was for one night, a signal trap to catch a pattern, then I would delete everything and forgive myself later. Forgiveness loves future tense. The clone SIM gave me mirrored texts for a few hours, then silence. Instead, an app pinged, a two-factor code for Signal, a messenger we'd never used together. I stared at the code like it might confess. Minutes later, a Lyft ping hit again, destination a short walk from that restaurant. I opened my laptop and watched the location history from the fitness tracker she had stopped wearing around me. Claire sat, idle, for 90 minutes on a street that runs behind a row of condos. At 1:13 a.m., a new contact appeared on the cloned phone. C. Just C. A single letter bold as a stamp. The message, same time tomorrow? I took a breath so slow it hurt. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot and saved it to a folder labeled taxes. Caleb called me that night because I had texted you up like a teenager. I told him a version of the truth. Man, he said, once you put a wiretap on your heart, every beat sounds guilty. I laughed without sound. I promised him I'd stop. Then I ordered a cheap Bluetooth tracker and wiped my prints from the box with a tissue. I stuck the tracker under her car's bumper as the streetlight flickered. Guilt is a messy roommate. It leaves fingerprints on every door. The morning after I planted the tracker, I couldn't meet my own eyes in the bathroom mirror. Claire noticed nothing or pretended not to. She poured coffee, kissed my cheek, and said she'd be late again because the client wants a breakfast run-through. I nodded and admired the choreography of this small lie, the careful specificity that discourages questions. At work, I told Priya. She didn't scold me. She documented me. Write a list, she said. What you did. Why. What you're looking for. What you won't do. She has a way of making rules sound like life rafts. She also said, talk to a lawyer before any confrontation. Not to threaten, just to know the terrain. Caleb texted, stop snooping or you'll never trust anyone again. Both felt right. Both felt impossible. That evening, Claire came home early with takeout from the restaurant we always said was too expensive. She set the white bags on the table like an apology and said, I've been stressed. Let me make it up to you. We ate in a quiet that tasted like truce. Later, she checked her phone and angled the screen away, and I felt the truce slide like a coaster on condensation. Before bed, I updated my list, added dates, and stared at the blinking cursor. Love asks for faith, safety asks for proof, pride demands an audience. I wanted only a verdict. The tracker pinged an unfamiliar address, and my stomach did a slow backflip. The address belonged to a storage facility Claire had never mentioned. Not a romantic apartment or a hotel, just a row of roll-up doors facing a cracked lot, security camera blinking like a tired eye. I drove there at noon under a slate sky and sat in my car pretending to watch a podcast while technicians swapped a keypad battery. I felt like I had slipped into a thinner world where everything looked normal, but meaning hid 2 inches to the left. Inside the glove box, I kept a printed sheet. What I could lawfully observe from public space. No trespassing, no lock-picking, no mail tampering. Doyle, the PI Priya recommended, had written it in a dry font. I called him from the parking lot. He said he could run surveillance, confirm timelines, and suggested I also pull bank statements for the past 6 months. If there's a second life, he said, it leaves receipts. That night, while Claire showered, I noticed a small brass key on her ring I had never seen before, stamped with a tiny crown. It matched the storage brand. On her desk, a note. Auto pay, Unit 17C. I photographed it and put the air back in the room by turning on the fan. I kept telling myself to wait, to gather, to breathe. But the fear started describing itself as urgency, and urgency has clever disguises. When the unit door rolled up, I saw our wedding in boxes and lies. Doyle didn't enter the unit. He only filmed Claire arriving, unlocking, loading out 2 bankers' boxes, and leaving within 11 minutes. His timestamp countered the late spin class alibi on my calendar. I obtained our bank statements and found automatic payments to a property management company I didn't recognize, small, regular, and labeled with a unit number, 3B. A secret lease. The name on it wasn't Claire's. It was an LLC we'd never discussed. I requested a copy of the public record for the LLC's registered agent. The email returned a scan with Claire's handwriting on a P.O. box and a forwarding service. Priya sat with me in a coffee shop, circled dates, and said, "You're in it now. Decide if you want truth or drama, because you can't hold both." I thought about the boxes. What does a marriage look like packed into corrugated cardboard? The tracker drew a pattern across the city like a quiet heartbeat. Townhouse to office, office to 3B, 3B to storage, storage to a particular restaurant with round windows and a lot of polished wood. The mystery charge. Doyle got a clear shot of Claire walking out with a tall man in a gray jacket, faces angled away, hands almost touching. They parted at the corner, practiced as dancers. Caleb called, "You still spying?" I said, "I'm documenting." He said, "That's what spies say before the credits roll." I finally saw the man's face, and it was horribly familiar. The man was our mortgage broker, Daniel, the one who had worked magic to refinance us last year. I remembered his smooth voice, the easy jokes, the way he warned us to read the fine print we never truly read. My stomach folded into itself. Affairs happen. Money makes them stick. What if this wasn't about romance at all? What if the second phone and the secret lease insulated a financial scheme designed to keep me paying for a life I didn't live? I pulled the lease record for 3B and found deposits that mapped suspiciously to our joint ATM withdrawals. Small cash injections, regular as breathing. Doyle suggested I check for payday loans or cash advances tied to my credit profile. I found 2 hard inquiries I hadn't made, both from lenders that operate convenience checks. Claire knows my mother's maiden name, my first car, the street I grew up on. Most thieves need strangers. I had a poet. I didn't yet know the motive, only the scaffolding. Secret lease, shared broker, cash staircase. I stood to lose the townhouse, my retirement match, and maybe the little dignity I had left. I printed a stack of statements and slid them into a manila folder so thick it bent. Priya tapped the folder and said, "Don't confront empty-handed, and don't confront alone." I went home, sat at the kitchen table, and watched the clock hands move like patient hunters. I answered a blocked call, and Claire's voice whispered, "We need rules." Claire proposed boundaries, which sounded like a negotiation for time. She wanted privacy around her work contacts and financial autonomy within our marriage, a phrase she said slowly as if pacing me into agreement. I said I could live with privacy, but not with secrets that borrow my name. She smiled sadly, like a teacher with a stubborn student. I made an appointment at the bank for Friday afternoon, asked for a printout of all joint and authorized user accounts, and scheduled a consult with a family lawyer for the following Monday. I told Priya, and she insisted on a checklist: copies of IDs, screenshots of text threads, the SIM logs saved to a flash drive, a journal entry for each investigative step with time and place. "If this goes nuclear," she said, "you need a map out." Doyle arranged to be nearby in case anything escalated at the restaurant Claire liked, a place I now understood as a stage. I reserved a mediator's conference room for the following week, ostensibly for budget planning, and sent a calendar invite to Claire and to Caleb. I labeled it neutrally to avoid tipping my hand. At night, I lay beside Claire and listened to her breathe like a stranger sleeping on a train seat beside me. I decided not to confront her at home. I decided to make the truth appear bigger than us. Then Daniel texted her, "Tomorrow, same table," and I booked a corner seat. At the restaurant, the wood gleamed, and the light smoothed everyone's edges. I arrived early, ordered water, and tried to be the kind of man who could sit in his own life calmly. Claire entered 14 minutes late, alone, and saw me before I could stand. Surprise cracked across her face, then repaired itself. "Lunch?" she said, like we were a calendar reminder. I said, "I have questions." She laughed and said, "About what?" I slid the manila folder halfway across the table. She didn't touch it. Instead, she reached for my hand and said, "I love you. I'm sorry I've been distant. Work is complicated." Her eyes shone like glass about to melt. For a moment, I hated my evidence for being ugly and plain. Then Daniel arrived, saw me, and paused. Claire didn't look at him, which meant she knew every camera in the room. He pivoted away with practiced ease, a man who sells options for a living. Claire squeezed my fingers and said, "Please don't embarrass us. We can talk at home." My spine bent under the old habit of giving her the benefit of the doubt. I almost caved. I almost slid the folder back into my bag and apologized for the hard tone of my questions. Then I saw the brass key in her purse, crowned and glinting. She whispered, "Choose me now," and I answered, "I choose the facts first." I invited Claire to the budget planning meeting 2 days later at a mediator's office. She accepted with a shrug, texting as we rode the elevator up. Caleb met us in the hallway, pretending to read a safety poster. Inside, a bank officer I'd asked to attend via Doyle's contact sat with a laptop and a small projector. I had requested a neutral review of our accounts. Just numbers, nothing personal, as if numbers were not the most personal things we own. Claire's smile froze when she saw the bank logo. "What is this?" she asked. "Transparency," I said, surprising myself by sounding calm. The officer connected to a secure portal and pulled up our joint checking, then a list of authorized credit lines. The projector hummed and threw our financial life on the wall. We walked through deposits and withdrawals like hikers stepping carefully over a narrow bridge. Then came the convenience checks, 2 of them, mailed to our address, cashed at a branch near the secret lease. Signatures blurred on the scanned images. The amounts were sharp, $2,000 and $3,500. Claire said, "This is invasive," and the officer said, "It's your joint account." Caleb cleared his throat and stared at the carpet. I felt my hand stop shaking. When the officer clicked to the LLC payments, I finally exhaled. Claire stood up so fast her chair skidded, and she reached for her phone. The receipts rolled like film. Unit 3B payments, transfers to the LLC, and text records from the clone SIM, screenshots I had printed, dates highlighted. Claire said the LLC was a client incubator, and Daniel was a networking mentor, and we all heard how thin the ropes sounded over that canyon. The bank officer clicked to the convenience checks again and asked who endorsed them. Claire said she didn't know. Someone must be using our mailbox. I put a photo on the table. Claire at the storage unit, carrying a box with our wedding album stacked on top like a crown. "Why are you moving our marriage into storage?" I asked. She said, "Because you're not present." The logic made me dizzy. Caleb asked, "Are you having an affair?" Claire said, "That's a disgusting question." I showed the lease listing with the registered agent tied to the P.O. box. I showed Doyle's timeline. I showed the restaurant charges. Claire's face emptied and then refilled with anger. "You stalked me," she said. "You violated my privacy." I said, "You used my name." Her mouth opened and closed, a door losing its hinge. Then Daniel texted during the meeting, "Landlord wants next quarter early. Can you swing it?" The room went so quiet I could hear the projector fan spin. Claire grabbed the phone, and the mask she wore finally slipped completely. In the days that followed, our social circle split like a dry board. Some friends said I had gone too far, using tech to police love. Others sent cautious messages. "If you need a couch." I moved into a short-term sublet with a couch so firm it felt like a lecture. The townhouse no longer smelled like us. It smelled like lemon cleaner and a rehearsal. Claire lawyered up first and filed a no-contact demand I followed to the letter. My own attorney, a calm woman who spoke in paragraphs, walked me through freezing the joint accounts, removing authorized user access where possible, and documenting communications through the portal. I learned to take screenshots like vitamins. The court date for temporary orders arrived faster than I expected and slower than I could bear. At work, I redid a network map and thought about marriages as topologies, redundant paths, single points of failure, rogue devices that siphon resources quietly. Priya brought me coffee and said, "You're doing the hard part, staying dull and steady." Doyle sent an invoice that made me wince and a note that made me breathe. Patterns don't lie. The price tag on the truth included housing, legal bills, and the shame of explaining why I moved out. Then a certified letter arrived addressed to both of us, and I froze. The letter came from the landlord of Unit 3B, demand for payment and notice of inspection. My lawyer advised responding with proof of separation and a request to remove my liability. It was the first time I wrote, in a formal document, that my wife maintained a secret lease financed through deceptive use of joint funds. The sentence looked like a bone under skin, clean, unambiguous, and breakable. I started therapy with a man who wore cardigans and asked quiet, useful questions. He said, "You built a surveillance system because you didn't feel seen," and I hated how neat that sentence was. We made boundary lists. No shared passwords, no joint debts without signatures, no meetings without a witness. I learned to cook one meal well, to sleep in the middle of the bed, to take walks without analyzing footprints. Caleb came over and assembled a bookshelf with me because action is the love language of brothers. We didn't talk much. Priya texted me a podcast about financial abuse and sent 3 knife emojis and a heart. The townhouse keys sat heavy in a dish. I decided to return only with another person present. Healing, it turns out, is mostly boring clerical grind. I measured progress by how often I reached for my phone to check her location and didn't. On inspection day, the landlord called and said, "You should be here." Unit 3B was smaller than I imagined, clean and staged like a catalog page waiting for a photo. The landlord walked us through, me, my attorney, and a maintenance guy with a clipboard. In the closet, a garment bag held Claire's navy dress from our 3rd anniversary. On the shelf, a shoebox contained convenience check stubs and a rent ledger with my name typed in the memo line. Facts are merciless, but they also set you free. I photographed everything, signed the inspection form, and handed over a brief letter stating I would not be responsible for future payments. We changed the locks at the townhouse the next morning under a temporary order. I returned with Caleb to collect my things and left my duplicate house key in a plain envelope on the counter where the fruit bowl used to sit. There was no speech, no cinematic apology, no last look over a shoulder, just the soft click of a door that no longer belonged to me. Over the next weeks, I learned the quiet vocabulary of endings: forwarding address, account freeze, inventory list, certified mail. Claire's attorney proposed a settlement. Mine redlined it and sent back conditions that fit like rails: clear repayment schedules, disclosure of all accounts, a dissolution timeline measured in weeks, not rumors. I stopped checking her locations because there were none to check, and my phone got lighter in my hand. Priya showed up with dumplings and a label maker, which is how you know someone believes in your future. Doyle sent his final report and a short note that said, simply, "You chose daylight." In therapy, I said aloud that surveillance had been my substitute for being seen, and the admission emptied something old and heavy from my ribs. I won't pretend I walked away noble. I walked away tired, smaller, and relieved. I mailed copies of the accounting to the court and watched a clerk stamp the date over our names like a clean seam. I learned to cook one meal well, to sleep in the middle of the bed, to let silence be a room and not a verdict. On the day the decree arrived, I set it on the new bookshelf Caleb built with me and opened the blinds. Dust rose and turned in the light like harmless galaxies. I texted my brother a photo, and he replied with a thumbs up and nothing else, which said everything. Later, I wrote myself a short list and taped it inside a kitchen cabinet. Document: ask, verify, refuse cruelty, accept clarity, choose daylight. If you're where I was, counting receipts and bargaining with dread, here's what helped. Write it down, slow it down, keep the evidence clean, talk to a professional who doesn't care about your drama, and tell one person who loves you enough to be boring. Privacy matters, but consent matters more, and love without consent is only choreography. The marriage ended, but I didn't. Tomorrow I'll take a walk without measuring footprints, make tea without watching the door, and sit on a couch that doesn't squeak like a confession. The story is over. The life continues, and for once it's mine.